Hello everyone, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and this is a Rover SD1 Vitesse, a car as British as a lukewarm cup of tea. So much potential but squandered with poor execution. To many of us, these have a special heritage. They bring up memories of the monstrous TWR racers of the 80s, or perhaps the fear and dread of seeing a flashing blue light in your rear mirror. In this video, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, how it drives today, and see what's on the market right now. Both Rover and Triumph submitted proposals for a replacement for the P6 and the 2000, and it was the final ignominy for Triumph that Rover's idea was finally picked. They'd been arch rivals for years, so you can imagine the humiliation. Anyhow, that is how the SD1 was born. This one looks glorious in its special order colour of a Porto red. If you squint, it kind of looks like a Ferrari Daytona, and that's because even Rover admitted that they borrowed some design cues, so inspired rather than copied. Like when you write out your homework, it somehow turns out to be exactly the same as your mates. It was a modern, forward-looking design that really moved things on from the rather dated-looking P6. On top of which, soon after it came out in 1977, this managed to win European Car of the Year. Now, when they first came out, they were only available with the V8, which had 150 horsepower. A little while after, the two Triumph straight sixes were added to the range, so that was a 2.3 and 2.6. And later still, in the 80s, when this car came out, they added a four-cylinder version. In V8 form, it was a proper Executive Express. It was beautiful, it sounded amazing, and it was really comfortable. And it wasn't just for businessmen and bank robbers either. It saw success in racing. So in 83, it won the Touring Car Championship, and in 85 and 86, several wins in Group A. The SD1 didn't just take Ferrari's design influence, it also wholeheartedly adopted the Italian approach to quality control, but with the added challenge of constant militant strikes. The result was poor fitting panels and interiors that wore very, very quickly. Police forces loved them for a bit. Then they realised that they spent more time in the workshop than on the roads. So they started switching to Vauxhall Senators and Ford Granadas. And they went to a solid rear axle, which was a backward step compared to the car it replaced. But in defence of Rover, the P6 was just too expensive to make, so they had to rationalise somewhat to make this work financially. And let's not forget the biggest killer of all, rust. If an SD1 sees a rain cloud, it will start corroding out of sympathy, although it has to be said that the later cars were much better built. In 1980, the BSCC, British Saloon Car Championship, changed its rules to allow engines of up to 3.5 litres, and this gave Rover the impetus to take the SD1 racing. So in 1982, the Vitesse was born. It had bigger wheels and tyres, lower, stiffer suspension, better brakes, and importantly, they managed to tease 190 horsepower out of the V8. That was through fuel injection and higher compression. It doesn't have enough power to scare a hot hatch now, but back in the 80s, this was serious poke, and it only weighed 1,400 kilos. So that's enough for a 0 to 60 of 7 seconds and a top speed of 135 miles an hour. And it got a meaty rear spoiler. If you wanted fog lights, as was the case with this car, you couldn't have the deep front spoiler. That's right, Rover made you choose between being able to see in bad weather or having your car look cool. Fun fact, the BMW M535i was the development target for the Vitesse. But whilst the BMW cost just over £20,000, this was 17,400, so pretty good value. Now in here there's a few little quirks that I have to mention immediately, and the first is that steering wheel. This is, I believe, what is known as a quartic steering wheel. So for a while Austin Rover had the brilliant idea, instead of having a round steering wheel, which makes no sense whatsoever, is to make it slightly squared. I don't know why they thought it was better, and I think some of them, on the Allegro for example, it was even more extreme than this. I'm not noticing a huge difference apart from the way it looks, but apparently the police forces who had these cars insisted on having the normal export market round steering wheels. There's what must have been quite advanced for the time. There's here a sort of series of trip computer things with LEDs, distance, all that kind of stuff. And I love the fact that it has settings for imperial, federal, and metric. And of course, imperial being British gallons, then federal being US gallons, and metric being European standard measurements, I suppose. But the controls are fairly logical, although some of them are a little bit of a reach. I'm quite far back at the moment because I've got back issues, so the seating position isn't ideal, but you have some of the things like the wiper, fog lights here in these little pods, series of instruments. The dash is quite attractive, I'd say. The earlier cars, the Series 1s, came without any wood. They were purposefully just made out of plastics to try and make the cars look more modern and get away from that traditional old man Rover feeling. But I'm glad they went back to wood, and this is quite a handsome dash. In these later cars, the materials, I think they were either a bit better put together, or the materials were a bit better, so they tended to last a bit longer. In the early cars, the interiors really were almost like consumables. But let's get to the important bit, which is the V8. It gathers speed quite elegantly. The engine sounds lovely. The steering is alarmingly light, I think. It's a bit lighter than I would be happy with. And the gearbox does its job. It's quite heavy. There's a little bit of notchiness in it. And it's a little bit at odds with the steering, which is so light, and the rest of the controls. The clutch is also similarly pretty light. If someone was to ask me how this handles, well, the suspension really is. It's pretty soft. Now the steering, although it's light, it's got a little bit of joie de vivre, really, this SD1. It's quite keen to turn. I'd probably compare it to a lovely big sofa, comfortable, squidgy big sofa that's just had maybe 3 shots of espresso. It has a bit of go, but it's not fast. It never feels fast. It's more about effortless torque, about making it easy to drive. The Vitesse came with sports seats. They don't look that sporty, but when you're sitting in them, they are quite scalloped. They do a great job of holding you in place. That M535 would have been a bit more of an accomplished handler, but nowhere near as comfortable as this. Yeah, on a tighter corner, just pushes wide, which is slightly disappointing, because you'd want, with the V8, you'd like it to be a bit more playful, but I think it's just not set up for that. 99% of the time though, you wouldn't really notice, because that's not the way it encourages you to drive it. Let's take it up through the gears again. Incredible turning circle. Right, let's go. Originally, it was supposed to be called the Rapide, but interestingly, Aston Martin owned that name, so they had to come up with something else, hence the Vitesse. So overall, what's it like to drive? Well, the more scalloped seats give you a bit more support. The light steering with the lovely burbling V8 propel you along in a really nice, relaxed manner. Now, in terms of running costs, they are good. Parts are cheap and pretty much readily available. The engines are really reliable. You just have to make sure that oil changes have been done regularly. and the all-important coolant is of the right kind. But there is a catch, and that is rust. So you have to check them everywhere because floor pans rust, wheel arches, sills, suspension pickups. Most cars now will be kept garage, so as long as you buy a good one, you're going to be all right. So the SD1, well, it was beautiful. It had the heart of a muscle car, but unfortunately, it was really badly built and unreliable back in the day. But now, as classics, they make a lot of sense. Now, if you're thinking of buying one, well, that's quite an interesting prospect because I had a look last night. There really isn't much for sale. On eBay, there's a few project cars under £5,000, but they're absolutely strictly non-runners. There is a very nice car on Classic & Car, which is a sub 10,000 miles aqua blue, which looks lovely. It's an early car, so a Series 1. Apparently it was owned by a gent who used to buy a new car every year and then put the car it replaced into storage. So his son ended up with 30 odd cars or something. Anyway, this has been recommissioned. I think it's up for £15,000. With that sort of mileage, it should be pretty much like new, although you might have a few little gremlins to chase from its lack of use. Apart from that, there really isn't much. Luckily, this one that Paul has brought up is for sale. He's asking £13,000, which to me seems pretty reasonable. It's got 113,000 miles on it, and he's done an overall restoration on it himself, so there's no rust anywhere. The interior looks good, exterior is very nice. I'll put his details in the video description. If you're interested, then get in touch with him. The car that followed up from this was the 800 series, and I had the pleasure of reviewing one of those. It really shocked me about a year ago. So if you want to see that, please click here. Thank you to Paul for coming down and bringing this car. Thanks to all of you for watching. See you for the next one.